So in this video, we're going to talk about all the terms that you're going to hear inside your superannuation fund. And it is important that you understand these terms because, as I said before, you can't make informed decisions if you don't have the information at hand. And these are all the terms that you'll hear thrown about, and it will confuse you. I've put a link below which has all these terms listed out for you so you can keep them as a handy reference. So please jump onto the link below and download that checklist. All right, so the first thing that you need to understand that inside your superannuation fund, there are two terms that get used all the time, and they are concessional and non-concessional. So it's important to understand these terms because there's some limits on how much your fund can receive of concessional and non-concessional contributions. So what is a concessional contribution? In plain English, it is a contribution that's been received that someone or something has claimed as a tax deduction. So that will include your super guarantee or your compulsory super that your employer has paid for you. It will also include salary sacrifice. So because your wages have been reduced to pay additional into superannuation, your employer effectively has claimed that superannuation as a tax deduction. And then there, of course, is personal contributions that you are claiming as a tax deduction. Now, to do that, there's a few rules, and I'll go through those a little bit later anyway. Non-concessional are contributions received by your superannuation fund that nobody has claimed a tax deduction for. So there'll be contributions like your personal contributions that you're not claiming a tax deduction, so out of your after-tax dollars. There'll be a spouse contribution, so you can make a contribution to your spouse's superannuation fund if they're a low-income earner. There'll also be your co-contributions if you're a low-income earner and the government has topped up your superannuation. There's other contributions that your fund can receive, and they're the Downsizer Contributions. And I talked about Downsizer in another video, so I won't go into that anymore other than to say that your Downsizer contribution doesn't use up part of your caps. But again, as I said, there is another video on Downsizer contributions, so please jump over and watch that if you think you might want to take advantage of it. So let's talk about superannuation funds for a minute. And why is it important to know your concessional and your non-concessional? Well, concessional contributions received, so remember, they're contributions that somebody has or is going to claim as a tax deduction, will have to pay contributions tax to the government of 15% of the contributions received on your behalf. So if $100 goes into super, $15 will go to the tax office and $85 your super fund uses for investment if it is a concessional tax contribution. There's also limits on how much your fund can receive at those concessionally taxed, so the 15% tax rate, and it's capped at currently at $27,500 for your fund to receive on your behalf. So it's important to know that what makes up concessional contributions so that you know that you don't go over that $27,500. And one of the myths we hear quite often here is that I can put in $27,500 on top of what my employer puts in. And that's not true because they're both concessional contributions. Your concessional contribution cap each year of $27,500 will include your super guarantee that your employer pays for you, any salary sacrifice that you make to your superannuation fund, and any personal tax contributions that you make that you tell your fund you're going to claim as a tax deduction. There is a rule that allows you to carry forward up to 5 years those contributions from previous years that you haven't included. There's some limits on when you can do that, and the most prevalent one is that your super balance needs to be less than $500,000. So if you're not quite sure if you can use those carry forward contributions as part of your current year concessional contributions, just reach out to us here and we'll have a chat and we can have a look at the tax office, or you can talk to your super fund to find out if you are eligible to claim that. And of course, most people want to start to claim those when they're getting closer to retirement, when they've got rid of their mortgage and they're a little bit more financially free. Okay, so non-concessional contributions, remember, they're the ones that you've put in that you're not claiming a tax deduction for, so out of your after-tax dollars. They're contributions that you've received from your spouse, so your spouse has made a contribution into your fund to top your fund up. And of course, the government co-contribution, if you're eligible for that, will be part of your non-concessional contributions. Now, at the moment, your fund can accept $110,000 per year non-concessional contributions from you. They do have another rule, similar to the carry forward rule that's available for concessional contributions, and that's called a bring forward rule. So you can bring forward your next 2 years of contributions. It does mean, though, that if you bring forward and claim and deposit $330 into your super fund this year, you won't be able to make any other non-concessional contributions for the next year or the following year because you have brought forward those contributions into this year. Remember, downsizer is excluded from that non-concessional contribution cap. And so you can, if you are eligible, and there is some rules around who's eligible and who's not eligible for the downsizer contribution. If you put that in to your super fund, you can still access this bring forward rule for your non-concessional. The other terms that you might hear getting bandied around at the moment is stapled superannuation fund. Now, this is a new thing that came in on the 1st of November 2021, and that's around effectively what the tax office is calling your super fund is stapled to you. So it's just an additional step that any new employers have to do for you when you change jobs to make sure that your superannuation is going to your stapled superannuation fund. And basically what it means is stapling means that superannuation fund follows you around. If you can remember a few years ago, and when superannuation first came in, your employer had a fund and everybody had to join that fund. And so lots of people had multiple funds because they had multiple employers over the time. And of course, that means that you're paying multiple fees and multiple, administration charges and things, which diminishes the value of your total superannuation. So the tax office has now stapled a fund to you, and it's your main fund. And then when you change employers, your employer can request the tax office to find out who your stapled fund is if you don't give them where you want your money to go. So it's up to you. It's part of notifying your employer. You tell them this is the fund I want my money to go to. But if you fail to do that, your employer can request to the tax office to find out who your stapled fund is so that they don't create a default fund, is what we used to call it, where they would just go, you haven't given me a superannuation fund, so I'm going to create one here for you. So I think that covers off most of the terms around superannuation and how that works. Just want to recap for you quickly that just as a reminder, any concessional contributions, remember, they're the ones that people have claimed a tax deduction for, will pay 15% of what you contribute to the tax office in contributions tax. You'll also pay 15% of superannuation earnings, so you'll still be left with the 85%. And again, the only time that changes is if you are what the tax office call a high income earner and you're subjected to a Division 243 assessment. And that's where the tax office will get you to pay an extra 15%. But that's covered off in another video where I go into Division 243 in great detail. So if you think you've got a Division 243 assessment, and you're not quite sure what it is or why you've got it, jump over and watch our video on Division 243. So that's it for this one. There's one more video to go where we just talk about the different types of superannuation funds and what they'll be. So jump on over to that video if you want to learn more about superannuation.